What if we've never actually lived in the same world? Many of us believe that time feels the same for everyone, that 1 second for you is exactly the same as 1 second for someone else. We tend to believe that reality is objective, existing outside of ourselves and favoring no one. We grow up assuming that truth is singular and can be discovered simply by looking for it. Everything seems stable, linear, and absolute, as if the world contains only one version of reality that we can all agree upon without question. But what if everything we've always considered certain is merely an illusion that we collectively believe in? What if the truth we discover is only the truth that emerges from our own perspective? Einstein helped us find at least part of the answer. Through his theory of relativity, he gradually dismantled many of the certainties humanity had long taken for granted. Together with Heuristic Mind, let's explore the possibility that truth may be nothing more than a matter of perspective. For hundreds of years, humanity lived comfortably within the framework built by Isaac Newton. In his work, Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, Newton described the universe as a vast mechanical clock, where time moved with certainty, uniformly, and without favoritism. This meant that 1 second experienced by a king in a palace was exactly the same as 1 second experienced by a laborer in a field. Through Newton's theory, people became accustomed to believing in a single objective reality that everyone could measure using the same standards of space and time. Under this view, the world appeared as a perfectly ordered system where everything could be predicted. There was no ambiguity and no fundamental difference in how space or time were experienced. However, at the beginning of the 20th century, Albert Einstein introduced a revolutionary idea known as the theory of relativity. This theory challenged and ultimately transformed the certainties established by Newton. Einstein introduced the concept of time dilation. According to this phenomenon, time is not fixed or rigid, but rather a dimension capable of bending, stretching, and slowing down. The secret behind this effect lies in two factors, velocity and gravity. When an object moves at extremely high speeds, approaching the speed of light, time for that object passes more slowly compared to time experienced by an observer who remains at rest. Imagine traveling aboard a spacecraft capable of moving near the speed of light. From your perspective, everything would seem perfectly normal, and time would appear to flow as it always has. Yet compared to people who remain on Earth, your time would actually move more slowly. If you spent 1 year traveling at such speeds, you might return to discover that those on Earth had aged far more than you had. This phenomenon is not merely an abstract theory or a product of imagination. It has been demonstrated through numerous scientific experiments, including studies involving muons, subatomic particles that survive longer when moving at extremely high velocities. These experiments provide compelling evidence that two individuals experiencing the same event may not experience the same duration of time. Time is no longer understood as a universal measure, but as something that depends on how and where an observer exists. Velocity is not the only factor that influences time. Gravity plays an equally important role. Within Einstein's framework of general relativity, massive objects such as planets and stars curve the fabric of space and time around them. As a consequence, time moves more slowly near regions of stronger gravity than in places where gravity is weaker. This effect, known as gravitational time dilation, has been confirmed through experiments such as the Hufele-Keating experiment, which used highly precise atomic clocks placed at different altitudes. Even modern GPS systems must account for these relativistic effects in order to maintain their accuracy. At this point, we begin to understand that space and time are not independent entities. Instead, they are united within a single structure known as space-time. In this framework, space and time cannot be separated because they are fundamentally interconnected, forming the very foundation of reality itself. When space bends, time changes with it. When position changes, the experience of time changes as well. In other words, reality is no longer something fixed and unchanging, but something dynamic that depends upon the observer's conditions. Perhaps the most radical consequence of this discovery was the transition away from Newton's rigid absolutism toward a more complex understanding of what can truly be considered absolute. Before Einstein introduced relativity, people believed there was a central point, a universal truth upon which everyone could agree. Relativity, however, demonstrated that there is no absolute frame of reference for measuring space and time, even though the laws of physics remain universally valid. Everything in the universe moves relative to something else. This realization led to a philosophical conclusion that initially shook the world. There is no privileged observer capable of viewing reality from a perfectly neutral or absolute standpoint. If two events occur in space, two observers moving at different speeds may perceive those events in different orders. Observer A may see a flash of light on the left before one on the right, while observer B may witness the opposite sequence. Remarkably, according to physics, both observations can be equally correct within their respective frames of reference. Here, science teaches us humility. If even the most fundamental laws of nature contain no single perspective that is completely absolute or unquestionably correct, then perhaps truth itself is not as simple as right versus wrong. And if this is true in physics, how could we possibly claim absolute certainty within the far more complicated realities of human society? Einstein demonstrated that reality is not rigid or uniform, but depends upon where we stand and how we observe it. Reality may reveal different versions of itself from different perspectives. What we consider to be facts may simply be reflections of our own viewpoint. Yet it is important to emphasize that relativity never suggests that all truths are equally valid without limits. On the contrary, the theory shows that truth may depend on context while still operating within universal laws. The absence of a privileged observer does not mean that every perspective is equally correct, because every observation remains subject to the same fundamental laws of physics. So if the universe itself refuses to become an absolute truth, what about us? If even space and time can bend and shift, what makes us so certain that the human mind is a perfectly clear mirror of reality? To answer that question, physics passes the baton to psychology. We must realize that the reality we experience every day is not a raw and unfiltered video recording, but an edited version constructed by our own brains. In physics, relativity is shaped by velocity and gravity. In human life, gravity is replaced by cognitive biases. Although they are not as precise as physical laws, cognitive biases work in remarkably similar ways. They shape how we perceive and interpret reality. We often believe that we see the world as it truly is, objectively and fairly. In truth, we see the world as we believe it to be. The human brain is not a camera that captures every pixel of light impartially. Instead, it is an incredibly busy editor, constantly filtering thousands of pieces of information and preserving only what it considers important. A simple example can be found in our everyday experience of time. 1 hour spent waiting in a government office with nothing to do but stand in line feels much longer than 1 hour spent with someone or something we love. Physically, the duration is identical. Yet in our perception, time undergoes an emotional form of dilation. This reveals that every person possesses their own internal frame of reference and system of values. Going further, phenomena such as confirmation bias function, much like Einstein's gravity. They bend incoming information so that it conforms to what we already believe. We naturally seek evidence that supports our opinions and convictions, while unconsciously ignoring or distorting facts that contradict them. The reality we believe in today is, in many ways, a construction shaped by the biases in subjective information embedded within our own perspectives. If we step deeper into the social realm, we discover that what we celebrate as facts are often constructions built upon foundations of culture, background, and personal experience. Here lies one of the most profound parallels with Einstein's theory. There are no privileged observers. No human being possesses a God's eye view capable of seeing everything with complete neutrality. Every piece of information we receive passes through the filters of culture and personal history. The same event, such as a new political policy, may be viewed as a life-saving truth by one group while being perceived as an act of oppression by another. Does that mean one side is lying? Not necessarily. Both groups genuinely experience that reality through the frameworks and experiences that define their lives. Education, past trauma, upbringing, and inherited values all serve as starting points that determine our position within the social landscape. We must have the courage to acknowledge that truth is often intersubjective, something agreed upon within a community but not necessarily shared by others. Echo chambers on social media offer a clear example. Modern algorithms function almost like gravity itself, creating extreme forms of social relativity. Entire groups become unable to communicate with one another because their social space-time has become so deeply curved. More simply, they can no longer perceive facts in a straightforward way. Any information coming from outside their circle is rejected or distorted before they are willing to understand another perspective. Just as Einstein shattered the absolutism of space and time, we must challenge our own moral and intellectual absolutism. Recognizing that truth is socially constructed does not mean denying reality. Rather, it means accepting our limitations as human beings in fully grasping it. Our realities are fragments, like millions of broken pieces of glass, each reflecting light from a different angle. If we fail to realize that we are merely one fragment among many, we remain trapped in the illusion that our version of reality is the only truth that exists. At this point, understanding that reality extends beyond numbers and rigid formulas leads us to the practical consequences of these ideas in society. Perhaps we have all wondered why humanity seems unable to escape conflict and war, or why small disagreements so often grow into lasting hostility. The answer may lie in our inability to understand social relativity. We frequently forget that we are all looking at the same object from different angles, yet we insist that only our perspective is legitimate and true. The root of many human conflicts, from arguments in social media comment sections to wars between nations, is the illusion of absolute truth. We possess a natural tendency to believe that our own perceptions represent objective reality. Yet, just as Einstein showed that two observers moving at different speeds can witness events in different sequences, human beings occupy different social positions and move through life at different velocities. These differences shape how we interpret and believe in what we experience. Problems emerge when we lock ourselves into a single framework and refuse to leave it. When someone believes they possess absolute truth, they automatically cast those who disagree as wrong, foolish, or even evil. Social psychology describes this phenomenon as naive realism, the conviction that we see the world objectively and that anyone who disagrees must be uninformed, irrational, or biased. We do not fight simply because we see different things, but because we fail to recognize that others have lived different lives. Imagine the number 6 painted on the ground. One person standing on one side insists it is a 6, while another standing opposite swears it is a 9. Both interpretations are perfectly reasonable from their respective positions, yet an objective reality still exists, one that becomes visible only when both perspectives are combined. The problem is that people can continue arguing indefinitely if neither is willing to step away from their position and see through the eyes of the other. Conflict flourishes when we stop viewing reality through multiple perspectives and instead appoint ourselves as guardians of truth. If we accept that reality contains elements of relativity and that every person carries their own emotional and sociological gravity, a new space becomes possible, the space of empathy. Acknowledging relativity does not mean abandoning principles or becoming indifferent. Rather, it is an exercise in intellectual humility. When we recognize that truth can take many forms, we may stop asking who is right and begin asking what the world looks like from another person's position. This is the essence of radical empathy. Einstein's theory did not throw physics into chaos. It provided a more accurate framework for understanding how everything in the universe is interconnected. Likewise, understanding that other people's perspectives are shaped by backgrounds, traumas, and cultures different from our own allows us to build stronger bridges of communication. Respecting other viewpoints also means gradually letting go of the urge to impose our own. What appears to us as laziness may be a tremendous struggle for someone living under far heavier pressures and burdens. What seems like radicalism to us may be a form of self-preservation for those who feel threatened. By dismantling the absolutism within our own minds, we stop viewing differences as dangers and begin seeing them as additional data that help us understand the broader reality. From Einstein's theory of relativity, we can perhaps draw a simple lesson. True peace is not a condition in which everyone agrees on a single truth, but one in which everyone acknowledges that human beings experience and interpret the world in different ways. Yet one final point must always be emphasized. Relativity still operates within laws and boundaries. Without those limits, we risk falling into relativism, the belief that all truths are equally valid without exception. Einstein's theory showed that observations of space and time depend on specific frames of reference, but it never suggested that everything becomes equally true or free from standards. Physics itself rests upon strict and universal laws. The speed of light in a vacuum, for example, remains constant and serves as the ultimate limit of the universe. Time may slow down and lengths may contract, but these phenomena still occur according to the same rules for all observers. Relativity is not about everyone being right. It is about truths that are conditioned by particular circumstances. Science does not treat every claim as equally valid. It operates through observation, experimentation, verification, and replication. A theory is accepted not because of who proposes it, but because it can be tested and consistently confirmed. Even in relativity, different observers may describe events differently. Yet those differences can always be translated into one another through precise mathematical relationships. This demonstrates that beneath diverse perspectives lies an objective structure that unites them. Without that structure, science itself could never progress. Problems arise when these concepts are transferred into social and moral life without recognizing their limitations. In everyday life, not all perspectives or beliefs carry equal validity. For example, the claim that the Earth is spherical rests upon overwhelming scientific evidence, whereas flat Earth beliefs are contradicted by countless observations. To treat both positions as equally valid in the name of perspective is to disregard centuries of scientific work. Understanding a perspective does not mean endorsing it as true. We can understand why someone believes something without agreeing that the belief is correct. Ironically, in attempting to escape naive realism by declaring all perspectives equally true, we may fall into another extreme that is no less problematic. Without standards for evaluating truth, we lose our ability to distinguish between facts, opinions, and misinformation. In ethics, unlimited relativism can also become dangerous. If every viewpoint is considered equally legitimate, it becomes difficult to criticize actions that clearly harm others. Violence or discrimination, for example, might be defended as products of a particular culture or perspective. Yet many moral traditions seek principles that transcend cultural differences, such as justice, human well-being, and respect for others. These principles serve as a compass, preventing us from losing our direction amid a diversity of perspectives. More importantly, relativity in physics was never intended to imply that reality is entirely subjective. Quite the opposite. It expanded our understanding of objectivity. It showed that to understand an event completely, we must consider multiple perspectives and connect them through consistent laws and evidence. Objectivity in this sense does not mean one correct viewpoint. It means the ability to understand the relationships among different viewpoints. It is a more mature form of objectivity, one that embraces differences without abandoning standards. Applied to human life, this approach becomes a balance between empathy and critical thinking. We recognize that everyone carries unique experiences, backgrounds, and biases that shape their understanding of the world. Yet we must also retain the courage to ask whether a belief rests upon solid evidence or merely on untested assumptions. Empathy without critical thinking leaves us vulnerable to accepting everything without question, while critical thinking without empathy risks making us rigid and inhumane. The greatest lesson of relativity, then, is not that all truths are relative. Rather, it is that truth often depends upon context, while still existing within boundaries that can be understood collectively. Relativity teaches humility in making claims about truth, while also encouraging us to seek strong foundations for our beliefs. It does not erase truth. Instead, it invites us to approach it with greater complexity and responsibility. Ultimately, understanding the limits of relativity makes us wiser in dealing with differences. We become less eager to judge, yet we do not lose our ability to distinguish between what can be justified and what cannot.